Hello, this is the fourth week in Advent. The four candles are lit in the Advent wreath. We're continuing the last chapter of Bartholomew's passage, and this is the fifth part of that last chapter titled Bartholomew's Passage. Glad to have reached their destination, the two friends trekked down the hill into the valley, sloshed across a cool stream, lapping up some of its waters, and then started up the hill toward the city wall. Many shepherds and caravans were camped in the valley, and a moment later Nathan stopped short and pointed to one. "If I'm not mistaken," he said. Then without another word he marched over to a caravan surrounded by tents so colorful that they looked like a field of flowers. Nathan searched among the caravan and then finally spotted a large, dark-skinned man. "Salamar!" he cried, and the man turned toward them. His face lit up, and he met his old friend with a bear hug. "It is good to see you again, Nathan," he said, "and I have good news for you. Jotham of Jericho has been found." "Praise be to Jehovah," Nathan said, and Bartholomew felt a large weight lift off his own chest. "How does this occur?" "The boy and my son were chased into a tunnel by one called Decca of Megiddo." At this, Nathan's face grew angry. "I should have accepted the rabbi's sword," he said. "That thief has been trouble for too long." Then, turning back to Salamar, he asked, "But how did you end up in Jerusalem?" "The tunnel led to some catacombs," Salamar answered, "and the catacombs led here, to Jerusalem. A man named Simeon helped the boys escape Decca's hands." Bartholomew had been silent for as long as he could. "And what of Ishtar?" he asked. "Is your son Ishtar safe?" Nathan looked at the boy, shocked that he knew the name of Salamar's son, but then a curious look crossed Salamar's face, and a moment later he said, "Bartholomew? Bartholomew of Tartake, is that you?" "Yes," the boy answered. Salamar dropped to one knee and hugged the boy tightly. "It is good to see you. But how is it you end up in Jerusalem with this old troublemaker Nathan?" Bartholomew quickly explained all that had happened to him, and Salamar was genuinely sad at the boy's story. Nathan looked on quite perplexed, and finally Salamar turned to him and explained. "We were camped on the shores of Galilee near Tartake," he said. "Bartholomew came over and made friends with us, and he traded me the finest of redfish I have ever tasted for a bit of tea." Turning back to Bartholomew, he asked, "Did you make good use of the tea?" "Oh, yes," Bartholomew answered quickly. "I traded it for a fine ram's horn." Nathan just shook his head in wonder and then asked, "Where is Nathan now? May we see him?" Salamar shook his head. "No, he's not here. He was searching Jerusalem for his family when some old prophetess told him to look in Bethlehem. Simeon seemed quite taken by the woman's words and escorted Jotham there this afternoon." Bartholomew's heart saddened again that he could not see his friend. "How far is it to Bethlehem?" he asked Nathan. "Only 2 hours' walk." Bartholomew looked at the sun. There was only an hour of daylight left. Nathan saw his disappointment and added, "Perhaps tomorrow we can go there for a visit." Bartholomew grinned, and just then a dark-skinned boy ran into the compound. "Ishtar!" Bartholomew called out. "It is I, Bartholomew of Tartake." There was a great reunion between the friends, and then Bartholomew said to Salamar, "I have seen the strange star you searched for. Did you find it yourself?" Salamar nodded. "Yes, Jotham showed it to us 2 nights ago, and it led us in the direction of Jerusalem. But since Jotham has been missing, it has not again appeared." "But we met your king Herod," Ishtar said excitedly. "He was most anxious to worship your Messiah when he is born. Father promised to tell him when we find the child." Bartholomew seemed to know everything that was going on, and Nathan knew nothing that was going on. So Salamar sat him down to explain. as he did, Bartholomew and Ishtar ran off to renew their friendship. Later that evening, after a fine meal of celebration, Bartholomew and Ishtar lay talking on their mats outside Ishtar's tent. "What do you think this new Messiah will be like?" Ishtar asked. Bartholomew thought a long thought. "I think he will be much like Nathan," he said finally. "Nathan will give up anything to help anyone and never ask anything for himself. And I think that's what the Messiah will be like." They talked for a long time, mostly about Jotham and the good friend that he was, and were just about ready to lie down to sleep when a bright light from the center of the camp lit up the sky. "What is that?" Ishtar yelled. "I do not know," Bartholomew answered. "Perhaps the tent is on fire." The boys looked around, but nothing moved anywhere in the camp. No one else seemed to have noticed, or they were all asleep. Bartholomew jumped up. "Come on!" Ishtar looked distressed. "We cannot. I am forbid to leave my tent once my father puts me to bed." Bartholomew looked at Ishtar with disgust. "We must go look at this thing. Your father would surely understand." Ishtar humphed and shook his head. "You are just like Jotham," he said. But he got up out of his bed and followed Bartholomew through the little village of tents. Not far away, as they rounded the tent of the harem of Ishtar's uncle, they saw the source of the light. Salamar's tent sat in the exact center of the camp and was made of the same light and shiny material as all of the other tents, but now it glowed like a bonfire and puffed outward as if some great wind were blowing. But the air was still and the tent did not burn, so the two boys were completely curious. Slowly they moved forward, wanting neither to be caught out of bed nor to interrupt some feast that was only for adults. But the light was so brilliant and the air so full of a sweet scent like honeysuckle that the boys could not hold themselves back. Stepping lightly, they moved slowly towards Salamar's tent, reaching out as carefully as if he were reaching for a snake. Salamar grabbed the edge of the tent flap between two fingers and slowly pulled it back. What they saw made both boys gasp. Salamar was turned away from them, lying face down, flat on the floor, and on the other side of him was an angel, its wings moving slowly, shining as brightly as the sun, and speaking words such as the boys had never heard before. Consider this. Are there really such things as angels waiting to protect and guide us?